Win big in 2024 with RotoBaller.com's MLB Premium Pass. It includes our preseason draft kit, 15 exclusive lineup tools, and the Team Sync platform. Get customized rankings for your specific league format. Sync your leagues with Team Sync and use our new live draft assistant. Then get customized advice for your scoring settings. Get a discount for any MLB Premium Pass using my promo code KNUCKLER, KNUCKLER. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio. Sign up today and start rotoballing like a boss. With the MLB season coming up, it's fantasy baseball, right around the corner. And folks, if you are looking to use any other fantasy baseball tool set this season, then I would say.
But I'm not impressed by your performance, and I look forward to.
This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral link and my referral code RotoBrady. Get a sweet, sweet deposit bonus. Get in there. Player prop parlay contest, free contest, paid contest coming to a state near you. That is a really fun platform over there. I would encourage you all to go check it out. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you episode 122 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Tap that, and we got UFC Vegas 85 this Saturday.
Break out the red panties.
It's been a couple of weeks since we had UFC action at UFC 297. Dricus Du Plessis, now the middleweight champion. Last week, a lot of non-UFC MMA. For those of you who did not buy the $10 in euros, Octagon 52 pay-per-view, I would encourage you to check things like that out, especially for the price of I think it was like $11 or something. Not a lot of non-UFC MMA action this week. There will be a few events on Fight Pass. If you want to find my picks for any other events besides the UFC, that's boxing, Bellator, for as long as that's going to still be around. PFL, One, Ryzen, LFA, Cage Warriors, Cage Fury, anything that's going to be on UFC Fight Pass, boxing. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tat That MMA Podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe, leave favorable reviews. This weekend, we got 13 fights for UFC Vegas 85. Going off at 4 p.m. on ESPN+. That means I will be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 2 to 3 p.m. on Saturday. Come out, let's talk DFS and sports betting for UFC Vegas 85. Let's have a fun conversation. The 13 fights on this card, we were supposed to get not really too many canceled fights. I think there was one that was going to be Melzik Bagdasaryan against William Gomi. But just a couple of fights rearranged, the Azat Maksum fight and the Thimba Garimbo fight. I'm excited to see both those guys still on the card. Starting off, we have a heavyweight fight between Jamal Pogues and Thomas Peterson. Landon Quinones of The Ultimate Fighter and Markel Medeiros square off at lightweight. Women's flyweight, Julia Stolyarenko and Luana Carolina. Blake Bilder vs. Young Lee at featherweight. Thimba Garimbo at welterweight against 5-1 Pete Rodriguez. Charles Johnson steps in like the stand-up workhorse that he is against Azat Maksum at flyweight. Women's strawweight, Meatball Molly McCann against Diana Belbita. Welterweight, Gilbert Urbina of The Ultimate Fighter and the Fighting Urbina family taking on Charles Radke. Middleweight, Aliskab Kizraev against Mahmoud Muradov. Women's flyweight, Vivian Araujo against Natalia Silva. These two are considered to be top 15 flyweights in the world, according to Topology.com. Welterweight, Rude Boy Randy Brown against Muslim Salikov. The co-main event at lightweight, probably going to bring some fireworks. It's Renato Moicano and Drew Dober. And the middleweight main event between two top 10, top 15 middleweights in the world, Roman Dolidze and Nasruddin Imavov.
Break out the red panties.
So let's start then with Jamal Pogues and Thomas Peterson. Thomas Peterson is the minus 166 favorite. Jamal Pogues the plus 140 underdog. Thomas the trained Peterson, 8-1 as a pro, 28 years old. All 8 wins are by knockout. He comes in, his last fight was in the contender series against one Chandler Cole. Got a second-round submission victory. I guess 8 wins. That win was by key lock. He's 8-1. This describes 9 wins in his career. So that doesn't make any sense. But he has 1 submission victory. The rest were all by knockout or TKO. 3, 4, every other pro fight of his career before the Contender Series, and besides his debut, was an LFA against people with, 500 or winning records. Nope, never mind. Doesn't matter. Corey Mogenberg had a 2-3 record when he fought him at LFA 142. But the win against Chandler Cole was important. Chandler Cole was a guy who, had spent some time in some decent shows, was on the Ultimate Fighter. He had been in PFL, fought Deontay D'Elia. That was an important win. Thomas Peterson's one loss is an LFA to one Waldo Cortez Acosta by third-round knockout. And he was undefeated as an amateur, by the way, and finished all 4 of 5 amateur fights, 1 submission, 4 TKOs, 3 TKOs. Damn. Jamal Pogues, on the other hand, 28 years old, 5 wins by decision, 4 by knockout, 1 by submission. He, too, has been at the Contender Series and LFA level for a bit now. First Contender Series fight 2019 by unanimous decision over Marcus Brojigau. A loss to Alex Polizzi in LFA. That was at light heavyweight, actually. Polizzi now, as I believe, a Bellator. Been in Bellator for a bit now since 2020. So that's 1 loss. Gets another Contender Series win against Paul Renato Jr. by unanimous decision. And that was, in a string of 3 straight decision wins. His last win was against Josh Parisian in February of last year, coming off a unanimous decision loss to Mick Parkin. And in that fight against Parkin, Pogues got outstruck 95-36. Thomas Peterson did get 3 takedowns, too, against Chandler Cole. The real thing is, I just think, Thomas Peterson, I think his wins have been more impressive, and I think they just have meant more, the ones that he has gotten. I don't know exactly how this one gets done, honestly. I do think, Pogues by decision might be the safest individual, other than, Peterson inside the distance. I think Peterson wins this fight, 65, 70 times out of 100. I think he is just the better fighter. I've been more impressed with his performances. Pogues with a win over Josh Parisian. You would have to show me more. And I think that, Peterson's one loss coming, in the third round to a guy who has established himself as a pretty good heavyweight in the UFC. As opposed to Pogues, Mick Parkin, certainly a good prospect. Yeah, I would feel pretty comfortable calling him that. And also, being able to even fight at light heavyweight is kind of a significant number for Jamal Pogues. I just think Peterson's the better fighter. So minus 166, I like that straight up for Thomas Peterson. If you get him inside the distance, did they not even have that number? That doesn't make any sense. They don't have Peterson inside the distance, but that is one I would take for Thomas Peterson. If I am going Jamal Pogues, I'm going by decision, plus 270. There's not a whole lot more value on that number, but I do think that is how he wins the fight if he does. It's hard for me to see, with Pogues, is he going to be able to take Thomas Peterson down 7 times like he did Marcus Brojigau and 5 times like he did Josh Parisian? I think it's just more likely that he, gets hit hard by Thomas Peterson and isn't able to execute the things that enable him to win by decision. But I'm looking forward to that one. The guy who wins that fight, I think really both guys could get, interesting matchups at heavyweight. There's always fights to be made at heavyweight regardless of the relevance of that particular matchup. I think there's fun guys that these guys can fight whether they win or lose, but I'm excited to see who the winner ends up fighting. Next up, we got Landon Quinones and Markel Maderos. So, Landon Quinones, kind of a scrapper from the Ultimate Fighter. He is going to be the plus 114 underdog. Maderos, the minus 135 favorite. Let's start off with Landon Quinones. Lost his UFC debut. Granted, to Nasrat Haqparast. Got outstruck 148 to 171 for Haqparast. This was a 30-27 fight on all three judges' scorecards. Medeiros won in the Contender Series by first-round knockout over Isa Isakov back October of last year, and made quick work of him, and so, a little bit deeper on Medeiros, who's an 8-1 professional, 27 years old, 6 career wins by knockout, comes in from Fury FC. Most of his, pro career has been spent with Fury, reputable organization for sure. Has a fight against Jacoby Jones back in 2019 at Colorado Combat Club. But then you look a little deeper on Landon Quinones, 28 years old. His last 2 losses are to Nasrat Haqparast and Jason Knight on The Ultimate Fighter. Those are, he did make a mistake against Jason Knight, a critical one. That does speak kind of against, fight IQ to a certain point. But maybe he learned something from The Ultimate Fighter, because he certainly fought a good fight against Nasrat Haqparast. He comes in from Titan FC. I think that's a reputable organization as well. I think that this is the one that Landon Quinones can get. He's a hard storm to weather. Medeiros, proved impressive against Contender Series and Fury FC competition throughout his pro career so far. But I do think that this is the one where real UFC experience and against a veteran like Jason Knight and against a guy like Nasrat Haqparast, I think that's going to be the thing that makes the difference. Give me Landon Quinones to win this fight 50 to 55 times out of 100. I think I'd say lean even closer to 55 plus 114. Hit it. Ow! And as far as outcome, it's like Landon, I don't think, he's got 5 knockout wins in his career, only 1 decision. I'll give him that. But Medeiros, we don't exactly know how this guy, he hasn't lost since February 2022, which is almost the beginning of his pro career. He's been knocked out once, but that was his first loss as an amateur. And the only losses that have followed since then have been decisions. I don't really want to take a prop for Landon Quinones, but I think Medeiros. No, and I really don't want to take one from Medeiros either. I think if I pick somebody to get a knockout, I don't know. Probably, let's take a look real quick. Quinones by knockout plus 400. Medeiros by TKO knockout plus 215. Yeah, I think if you go Medeiros, go ahead and go by TKO knockout plus 215. But I'm very comfortable just taking Landon Quinones as the mild underdog straight up. Next up, we got Luana Carolina and Julia Stoliarenko at women's flyweight. Stoliarenko, the minus 148 favorite. Carolina, the plus 124 underdog. Now, you've heard me talk about Luana Carolina before and this magical quality that a lot of fighters have, where they're not even popular fighters a good, amount of the time. They don't, a lot of their fights just aren't spectacular, but there's a quality that they have where they never do too much damage, but something about their style prevents damage being done to too much of an extent to where you can question a lot of the rounds that they're in. Luana Carolina is one of these people, and it's how she finds herself in so many close decisions and controversial decisions. Let's start with Luana. Winner of 3 of her last 5, but loser of her last 2 of her last 3. So that run started in 2021, 2 straight decision victories over Poliana Botello and Lupe Godinez. She got outstruck by Poliana. That was the split decision. She outstruck Lupe by a decent margin, 53-23, and got taken down twice. Molly McCann knocked her out with a 3rd-round spinning back elbow. She lost a split decision that probably shouldn't have been a split decision against Joanne Wood back on March of last year. Got outstruck 131-100, taken down twice. Luana last time out, July of last year, unanimous decision victory over Ivana Petrovic, outstriking her 41-22, getting taken down 2 times to 1. Julia Stoliarenko, both born in 1993, by the way. After, rough start to her UFC career, 4 straight losses and loser of 5 of her first 6. But she has now won 2 of her last 3, both by first-round armbar against Jessica Rose Clark and Molly McCann, July of last year. looking a lot. I think that, like, you look at Julia where she was fighting before, and that was a bantamweight. It seems like flyweight has been, a pretty good difference maker for her here, the way she looked against Molly. She got handled by Chelsea Chandler and knocked out in the first round, October of 2022. That was a catchweight bout. Now maybe at flyweight things are a little different. Luana has been subbed before in the UFC. That is important. I think, like, there's two routes you go with this. Like, I think either you go Julia Stoliarenko. I think you go Julia Stoliarenko minus 148. I think Luana plus 124 isn't a bad number considering how close the damn fights are that she's in. She has the ability to land half the strikes that you do and somehow come away, with either a split decision loss, a split decision win. People might not agree with any of the results that come up from all three judges, but Luana Carolina finds herself in a lot of close fights. On that alone, I think 124 isn't a bad number. See if it moves any between now and Saturday. But I think this is a prop option here. I think you either go Stoliarenko by sub plus 140, or you go Luana by decision plus 180. I think the numbers on those props speak for themselves. Typically, I would be more inclined to go with the fighter who has the option to win on the judges' scorecards more likely than by submission. But Julia Stoliarenko, it does feel like I've slept on this, enough now and I was really surprised by the Molly McCann outcome. And so let's hop on Stoliarenko this time, and let's see if it really is going to be that big of a difference at flyweight. Next up, we got Blake Builder against Jong Young Lee. Blake Builder, the plus 124 underdog, Lee, the minus 148 favorite. For that reason, let's start with Blake Builder. 8-1-1 as a professional, 33 years old. Always seems to me like he's younger than he is. Winner on the Contender Series. He came in via Cage Fury. Won 2 fights there and was their featherweight champion. First round rear naked choke victory against Alex Morgan on the Contender Series. You win against Shane Young by unanimous decision in his UFC debut. In that fight, landed 111 strikes to Shane Young's 80. Then last time out against Kyle Nelson, loses by unanimous decision, getting outstruck 59-45. For Jong Young Lee, 3 wins at the UFC level, essentially. The first 2 came in Road to UFC in June and October of 2022. He got a first-round armbar over Zai Ben and a first-round knockout over Liu Kai. Then in his UFC Fight Night UFC debut, he got a split decision victory against Yiza. Now, he outstruck Yiza 25-24, but he got taken down 5 times and ends up coming away with the split decision victory. Before that, Lee, as a 10-1 pro, currently ranked 88 in the world at featherweight, according to Tapology. 7 of his 10 career wins inside the distance. He was in Road FC before he came to Road to UFC. This guy loves roads. Let's call him a construction worker. And, so this is a guy that's, consistently proven 4 wins by knockout, 3 by submission, 3 by decision. He can get you any which way. That's a really tough one here. I love the Road to UFC guys. But I see that this guy's really talented. Blake Builder, though, 2 wins or 2 fights at the real UFC level. The Yiza fight, just for the result, and coming against someone who was also green and 27 years old, and that he was making his UFC debut too after Road to UFC. I have a tough time going with Lee. As much as I kind of hope he wins, I'll be rooting for him. And he's one of the talents from Road to UFC. I'm excited to see what comes from. Ultimately, I think that this is like, I don't know, Blake Builder 55 out of 100, I would say. So give me Blake Builder plus 124, I suppose. And, how does that happen? I don't know. I would go Blake Builder by decision, just landing more strikes than Lee over the course of, 3 rounds. So I go like Builder by decision. That is plus 300. That's a solid number. And then I would go Lee just inside the distance plus 165. I think that's the second best prop of the fight. And I could see Lee being really popular in DFS this week. Stoliarenko, Quinones, Peterson, I think are all viable DFS plays regardless of format this week. Just for the finishing potential or the high volume striking potential. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Thimba Garimbo and Pete Rodriguez. Garimbo is the minus 258 favorite. Pete Rodriguez, the plus 210 underdog. Let's start with Pete Rodriguez. Lost his UFC debut by first round knockout. We will forgive him, though, because it came against Jack Della Maddalena.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
Ended up getting a first-round knockout last time out. That was all the way back in October of 2022 against Mike Jackson, at least at the UFC level. He's only 5-1 as a professional. There couldn't have been many fights in between then. He had 2 straight fights canceled against Natan Levy. He got sick the first time, and he botched his weight cut the second time. So you don't like to see that. Garimbo, 11-4 as a pro, 33 years old, 6 wins by submission, 1 knockout, 4 decisions. This guy came in from UAE Warriors and EFC. I love EFC. He was their welterweight champion. You guys know I love the EFC products, and he was on EFC Africa cards early in his pro career. Love seeing that. And what country is he from, by the way? Zimbabwe. I would love to see more fighters from Zimbabwe in the UFC. So, it's more like Thimba Garimbo for his last 2 fights. He lost his UFC debut to AJ Fletcher by an early submission, but then bounced back in May of 2023 with a unanimous decision victory over Takashi Sada, 33-30 in the striking, got a knockdown and 3 takedowns to 2. Mike Jackson, what do I do with that? That win does not mean a whole lot to me. The loss to Jack Della Maddalena, I'm not going to hold that too strongly against him, but at least Thimba we've seen get, an understandable loss in 2023, but bounced right back in a few months with, a not statistically significant win over Takashi Sada, but a win nonetheless against, a guy that at least, has gotten some UFC wins and has, had to face some tough competition like Gunnar Nelson, Brian Battle, and Belal Muhammad. That just means, more to me than a Mike Jackson win. For that reason, I'm going with Thimba Garimbo. As far as how it happens, Thimba is mostly, he can win on, on the judges' scorecards. But submission's been the most, common one. Pete Rodriguez's only loss is by knockout to Jack Della Maddalena. I would say you go numbers-wise. I think Thimba wins this fight like 75, maybe even 80 times out of 100. I think he's the better fighter, too. And it sucks that you have to make your debut against JDM, but you got to bounce, it was a nice knockout over Mike Jackson. That just means nothing to me. And Thimba's just proven himself that much more at the UFC level and has, almost 10 more fights as a professional than Pete Rodriguez does. Garimbo by decision is plus 450. Garimbo by submission plus 110. I do think that the pace of this fight I think that Rodriguez might try to put Thimba in danger, and Thimba looks to get out there sooner rather than later. Submission plus 110, then I go Garimbo by decision plus 450. I suppose if I'm going Pete Rodriguez, I say just by TKO knockout plus 275. But that's a harder one to call, especially with Pete Rodriguez's, layoff and the fact that, one time that a fight was canceled, it should have, he got sick, and what are you going to do? But then he messed up his weight cut the second time. You do question that when it's been that, now over a year since you've been in the, in the octagon fighting. Next up, at flyweight, We got Azat Maksum, the minus 230 favorite against Charles Johnson, the plus 190 underdog. Charles Johnson stepping in for Nate Maness. That would have been a great fight to see. But, Charles Johnson, he's a guy that steps in these situations. And unfortunately for Charles Johnson, what looked like he lost his UFC debut to Muhammad Makayev. He's had to fight some tough people, O'Day Osborne, Cody Durden, Rafael Estevam. All those guys handed him losses. And it looked like Charles Johnson was going to kind of maybe be on a run when he had those 2 straight wins against August Zumagulov. That was by split decision in a really close fight where there was over, 200-something strikes landed. And then gets the first round knockout over Jimmy Flick. Now, August Zumagulov is no longer in the UFC, and Jimmy Flick has done Jimmy Flick, I keep mixing it with JP Baz. That was an impressive win. Jimmy Flick now coming off of a comeback submission victory over Malcolm Gordon. But it's now Charles Johnson having lost 3 in a row by decision. He got taken down 11 times by Cody Durden, 3 by Rafael Estevam, and he outlanded Rafael 72-18. But the 3 takedowns was what it took for Rafael to end up with the decision. Obviously, those numbers alone do not tell the full story. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards for Estevam. And then O'Day Osborne beat him by split decision too, and it was off the work of the takedowns. Azat Maksum made his UFC debut July last year against Tyson Nam, won by split decision, got 2 takedowns, and even though he got outstruck 81-46, got the split decision. That sounds like exactly how you beat Charles Johnson, even if you don't put him away. And Azat Maksum, currently ranked as the number 18 flyweight in the world. He is 28 years old. 5 wins by knockout, 6 by submission, 5 by decision. He is a jack of all trades. He came in via the Octagon organization, Octagon with a C, not with a K. Was in Brave CF as well. You might have questioned, who has this guy exactly fought up until that point. But, the win against Tyson Nam, even by split decision, was, that is a legitimizer for sure. And he's won a lot of fights in his pro career, undefeated, 17-0. This is exactly the kind of guy, look, maybe a few months ago, I'd say, look, I think Charles Johnson's being undervalued, but not at this line. If it was plus 275, maybe that's where I say Charles Johnson is being undervalued. But again, this is a fighter in Azat Maksum who hails from Kazakhstan. That's a group you less and less want to fade. But at minus 230, I like Azat Maksum. I feel comfortable with that straight up. Maybe pair that together with someone of similar odds, maybe Thimba. Maybe even, Thomas Peterson, something like that. And that's just, on the undercard, obviously. But Azat Maksum, minus 230. Hit it. I think he wins this fight 75 times out of 100. And then I would say Maksum by decision, plus 100. That is a fantastic value. And if I had to go with something that was not by decision, I don't know. I don't think I would. Maybe Maksum by submission plus 500. But I think by decision is the way to go. And I think if you're going Charles Johnson, in the same vein, I think you maybe plus 190 isn't a good enough number. So maybe go Johnson by decision plus 300 if you like him. Azat Maksum, also going to be popular in DFS this week. Then, next up, we got Molly McCann and Diana Belbita at strawweight. Belbita, the plus 210 underdog. Meatball Molly McCann, the minus 258 favorite. Let's start up with Diana Belbita. Loser of 2 of her last 3. Only won 2 in the UFC against her 4 losses since October of 2019. The hell? This is a rematch. I forgot that. That's so weird. Molly McCann beat her the first time in Belbita's UFC debut, outstriking her 113-98, 5 takedowns to 1. Since then, Belbita has lost to Liana Jojua by first-round armbar, Gloria DePaula by unanimous decision, and Carolina Kowalkiewicz put on a really nice performance against her last time, October of 2023 at UFC Fight Night, Dawson vs. Green, and landed 141 strikes, 299, got taken down 2 times by Belbita to Carolina's 1 in route to a unanimous decision loss for Belbita. Meatball Molly McCann, born in 1990. She is 6 years older. Loser of 2 in a row, but she was on a 3-fight winning streak before that. You might remember her celebrity sword when she beat Yejeong Kim 127-122 in the striking, 2 takedowns, then got 2 straight spinning back elbow victories against Luana Carolina at UFC Fight Night Volkov versus Aspinall and UFC Fight Night Blades versus Aspinall. She only fights on Tom Aspinall cards when she beat Hannah Goldie. Losses to, she was on a 2-fight winning streak when she beat Diana Belbita the first time. Against Ariana Lipsky, who she landed 108 strikes against, and Priscilla Cochera, who she landed 107 strikes against. To this day, Molly McCann has had fights where she's landed, 2 takedowns, 1 takedown. It ended up going one way or the other. She took Diana Belbita down 5 times. That is her UFC career high. Belbita got, taken down once by Gloria DePaula, twice by Hannah Goldie. I don't see any reason, even based on recent results for Molly McCann when she lost to Erin Blanchfield and Julia Stolyarenko with 2 straight submissions, I see no reason why this fight should go any differently. I think this is a fight that you can kind of expect, if not Molly to look more impressive. I don't know. Molly was getting built up to maybe be a little bit more than she was because the whole Patty Pimblett thing. The British fans love her, all understandable. The last 2 losses really showed her limitations, and anytime she goes on a winning streak, it seems like it's always followed with 2 straight losses. I just don't think Diana Belbita even still has any of the tools to beat Molly McCann. I think Molly McCann will be popular in DFS this week. I think Molly McCann wins this fight 75, 80 times out of 100. Diana Belbita.
Don't do this. You cannot do this,
And I would say, go Molly by decision, minus 105. I think that's a really good number for someone who's a heavy favorite like that. There's a lot of, favorites in this, like, minus 250 to 300 range, I think are right for parlaying. And check out my man Blood Money MMA Bets because he loves that kind of action. Belbita by decision plus 330, probably the safest way to go for her too. But this is one where I'm riding all Molly. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Gilbert Urbina and Charles Radke. Urbina is the minus 205 favorite. Radke the plus 170 underdog. Let's start off with Charles Radke. Winner against Blood Diamond in his UFC debut at UFC 293, September of 2023, Adesanya versus Strickland. My God, can you believe that was already that long ago? Radke got outstruck in that fight, 44-35, landed 1 takedown. It was 29-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards in that fight. Right. That's what happened. Gilbert Urbina, 6 years younger, the RGV bad boy. Lost in the Ultimate Fighter, finale to Brian Battle. Got subbed in round 2. Then, May of 2023, revenge for the Fighting Urbina brothers, who have, historically struggled to hang around the UFC level once they got there. But he beat Orion Sosei with a second-round knockout, outstriking him 51-16 in the process with 2 takedowns in the second round. To go back a little bit further on, Charles Radke, 8-3 as a pro, 33 years old, 3 wins by decision, 2 by submission, 3 by knockout. Came in from Cage Fury, had a handful of fights there, not against great competition, honestly. Fought guys like Justin Montalvo and Chris Gonzalez earlier, but lost to them, and Austin Hubbard, lost to those guys too. The Mathetha fight means way less, I think, than the Orion Sosei fight. That between these two. And, Urbina lost to Trayshawn Gore and Brian Battle from the Ultimate Fighter. His other loss before them was at LFA 49 against Sean Brady. And at this point, with Urbina being 6 years younger, with him having the second round knockout victory over Sosei his last time out, that's enough for me to, ride heavily with Gilbert Urbina. I don't know how I feel as far as Urbina from a DFS standpoint. I think he probably wins this fight like 70 to 75 times out of 100, minus 205. Hit it! Ow! But how, Urbina as a pro, 3 wins by decision, 2 by knockout, 2 by sub. Radke as a professional, 1 knockout loss and 2 decision losses coming a handful of years ago. That's probably how I'd split it. Like, you look for what the better number here is. Urbina by TKO knockout plus 200. Urbina by decision plus 275. I think those are probably of equal value. And so, I don't know, maybe you stay away from that one and you don't bet this one too heavily. Other than pairing that minus 205 with something or, seeing what those prop odds are by the time that the fights kick off. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup between Ales Cobb, Kizraev, and Mahmoud Muradov. Muradov, the plus 124 underdog. Kizraev, the minus 148 favorite. Let's start with Kizraev. Winner of 2 in a row, in counting the Contender Series at the UFC level. 2 rear naked chokes. One in the first round on the Contender Series against Enrique Shigemoto. Then in the second round against Dennis Tiolulin, March of 2022. Outstriking Tiolulin 42-31 in the process, landing 2 takedowns. Tiolulin only has 1 win in the UFC out of 5, and that's against Jamie. How is he still in the UFC picket? Again, not to be like that. It was just, objectively, Jamie Pickett was not winning a lot of fights, and a lot of those fights just, ended up being not that meaningful for the purpose of moving forward other than to show that you can beat Jamie Pickett. Mahmoud Muradov has fought in 2023, by the way. That's, pretty important. Kizraev is undefeated at 14-0, but Muradov 26-8 as a professional, 33 years old, ranked 38th in the world at middleweight, 17 career wins by knockout, 6 by decision, 3 by submission. And Kizraev, just to check real quick, he's also 33 years old, by the way, 5 wins by knockout, 4 by sub, 5 by decision. Yeah, didn't fight between that Contender Series fight in 2020 and his UFC debut in 2022. And his fight with Jacob Malkoun was canceled because he had to withdraw. 4 straight fights canceled between September of 2020 and March of 2022 against Wellington Turman, Kyle Dawkins, Alicia DeChirico, and Abus Magomedov. 1 fight was canceled just due to COVID. Kizraev had to withdraw from 1. These really weren't his fault, but at the end of the day, that's how long it's been since, he fought. After, almost a 2-year layoff, now it's been, almost 2 years since he last time fought. And he came in from Fight Nights Global. Before that, he was their interim welterweight champion before the Contender Series. Muradov. He, only won 1 fight of his last 3. But, the guys that he's fought, it's meaningful. Decision victory over Alessio DeChirico, outstriking him 54-36 in his UFC debut. 2 straight third-round knockouts against Trevor Smith and Andrew Sanchez, January of 2021. His 2 straight losses came against Gerald Meerschaert. Very understandable. That was a second-round rear naked choke for Meerschaert. He got 3 takedowns, was getting outstruck 40-32 en route. Then he lost one of those Kai Barello decisions where there's only 33 strikes landed combined, but Cal Barello finds a way to win on the judges' scorecards, and convincingly so. Somehow. He's that kind of fighter. So he didn't really get much action off against Kai Barello, but against Brian Barberena, July of last year, unanimous decision victory, got 2 knockdowns, outstruck Barberena 54-28, and got 13 takedowns. That is just, here's the thing. Muradov, if you can land 91, 79, even 54 strikes against Kizraev, you stop his wrestling and you even I think that this is all close enough in skill set. And especially in, with the weird layoff thing with Kizraev, the Black Wolf, by the way, is his nickname. Pretty awesome. And just the fact that the skill set, between these 2 fighters is so close. For that reason, I go Muradov here. I think this is about a 50-50 fight, so give me Mahmoud Muradov plus 124. Hit it! Mahmoud Muradov.
Nick, one comment, man. man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
Khizriev might be undefeated, but this could be a rude awakening for him on Saturday after, only one fight at the UFC level, at any level, in, like 4 years. That is staggering. So I think that you go Makhmud Muradov by decision plus 350. It's the same number for by knockout TKO. We just have not seen Khizriev lose. So it's hard to tell exactly how that happens. And I think that if you do go Muradov, I think that you go by TKO knockout just because that's the overwhelming majority of the wins that he has gotten over his career. Khizriev, if you're picking a route for him, it's hard to go wrong. I could see by submission. That's plus 300. I could see by decision plus 275, plus TKO knockout plus 400. I think between submission and decision is where you choose for Khizriev. And knockout and decision is how you have to choose for Muradov. But I am very happy just going Muradov plus 124. Next up, we got a women's flyweight matchup between Viviane Araujo and Natalia Silva. Silva is the minus 355 favorite. Araujo, the plus 280 underdog. Natalia Silva is going to be a very favorite parlay pick, DFS pick, favorite watch possibly of this card, what have you. She is a fighter who is on a fast ascent up the UFC women's flyweight division. That handicap is rightfully put. Let's start with Araujo, though, to talk about that. So, actually, winner of 2 of her last 4. And, this is a fighter who, for a while, has had to fight tough competition at flyweight, starting with, Jessica Ai and Montana De La Rosa, Roxanne Modafferi, who she beat, her and Montana. 4 fights ago, May of 2022, so she had 2 fights per year the last 2 years. Love to see it. All of her fights have ended by unanimous decision since her third-round knockout debut at UFC 237. So she beat Andrea Lee by unanimous decision, got outstruck by Lee 47-39, got 3 takedowns to 1. Landed 126 strikes and 2 takedowns against Alexa Grasso, loses by unanimous decision against Amanda Ribas, got outstruck 98-46 and taken down twice at UFC 285, loses by unanimous decision. Last time out, gets a unanimous decision victory over Jennifer Maia, outstruck by Maia 41-24 and 2 takedowns each. I think that this was a close decision that I might have lost money on when it came to Maia. It was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. Then we move on to Natalia Silva, who is 11 years younger. She is coming off 4 straight victories in the UFC. That Jasmine Jasudavicius win in her UFC debut where she outstruck her 96-31, 2 takedowns. That didn't even tell the full story of that fight because she absolutely dominated and hurt Jasmine throughout that fight. 3rd round spinning back kick knockout over Teresa Bleda. Next fight out, then a 1st round knockout over Victoria Leonardo, May of 2023. She too has had 2 fights each the last couple of years. And now a more affirming victory against Andrea Lee, August of 2023 by unanimous decision, outstriking Lee 70-43. It's like, Araujo, you look at her resume and it's like, it makes the number on Natalia Silva still seem crazy, but I don't think it is because I just don't think Araujo will be able to keep pace with the speed, the accuracy, the power of Natalia Silva, who is going to hurt you throughout a fight and batter you at every which level. I think Araujo can get the wins over the likes of the Andrea Lees and the Jennifer Maias, where, it's a little bit more her pace. Those fighters are more seasoned veterans. Natalia Silva is an absolute killer. And, I would call Natalia Silva much closer to the Ribases and the Alexa Grassos than I would the Maias and the Lees. And so for that reason, I think that number is justified. How exactly does it happen? I think that Viviane Araujo is going to do what she does and try to make this fight her pace, or she's going to get overpowered. Those are the 2, outcomes. Natalia Silva is a must-have in DFS this week. I think Natalia Silva wins this fight 80 to 85 times out of 100. I'm not touching a straight-up victory here unless you're making Natalia Silva a parlay pick. Silva by TKO knockout is plus 500. Silva by decision is minus 150. I think, especially the way Araujo has shown that she is able to stretch fights out to the judges, I think that makes sense. But this very easily could turn into, the first knockout loss in the UFC for Viviane Araujo. And if I was going for Araujo, you go Araujo by decision plus 400. Pretty straightforward. Next up, we got a welterweight matchup between Rude Boy Randy Brown and Muslim Salikov. Randy Brown, the minus 278 favorite. Salikov, the plus 225 underdog. Let's start off with Rude Boy. Winner of 5 of his last 6 fights dating back to April of 2021. Rear naked choke victory over Alex Oliveira. Unanimous decision victory over Jared Gooden, where he landed 115 strikes. Split decision victory over Chaos Williams, who he outstruck 93-75 and survived a knockdown. Unanimous decision victory over Francisco Trinaldo, October of 2022. And then he loses by rear naked choke to one Jack Della Maddalena. That happens when you fight JDM. That was February of 2023 at UFC 284. And then the last time out against Wellington Turman, gets back on the winning horse, gets a unanimous decision victory, outstriking Turman 64-55, 2 takedowns. So we all remember Randy Brown getting knocked out by those pinned to the upward punches by Nico Price when Nico Price was doing that kind of thing to people. You look back at the last 4 losses for Randy Brown, stretching back to February 2017. It's Belal Muhammad, Nico Price, Vicente Luque, and Jack Della Maddalena. Noteworthy. Muslim Salikov will be at an 8-inch reach disadvantage. He is also 6 years older than Randy Brown. The King of Kung Fu is Salikov's nickname. So Salikov was on a 5-fight winning streak from April of 2018 to June of 2021, included the likes of Loriana Stariopoli, Nordine Talib, Elizu Zaleski, and Francisco Trinaldo. Loser at 2 of his last 3. A second-round knockout loss to Yi Zhongliang, and a unanimous decision loss to Nicholas Dalby, who outstruck him 86-57, 2 takedowns each for both of them. That was at UFC Fight Night Vittori vs. Cannonier, June of last year. His only win in that time was a third-round knockout over Andre Fiallo, and that win meant less and less as time went on when it came to Andre Fiallo, who I liked, but he just could not put it together inside the octagon with 2 wins out of 7 fights. And the only wins coming against Miguel Baeza and Cameron Van Camp. I think you have every reason to take Randy Brown here. Salikov, it's the age. It's the reach disadvantage against a guy like Randy Brown. It's how the last 2 fights went for him. I could see Randy Brown knocking you out. Maybe not as easily as I could see it from Lee. And I can see, Randy Brown outstriking him 86-57 with a close, comparable number on the takedowns like Nicholas Dalby did. And Randy Brown, in his career, 6 wins by knockout, 6 by decision, 5 by submission. And, 4 of the last 5 went 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 of his last 4 UFC wins have all come by decision. He's a guy that can finish people for sure. That's just not how I'm seeing this one exactly play out, the way that Muslim Salikov tends to fight. The dude is, about to turn 40 years old. That's pretty significant. I would say Randy Brown, might also be popular in DFS this week. I think you have a good amount of choices, honestly, because there's a lot of fights where, I think that people are in that minus 250, minus 300 range. And you feel good about, the level of excitement that'll be brought in those fights, coupled by statistical scoring. I think Randy Brown wins this fight 75 to 80 times out of 100. Minus 278, throw that in a parlay as well. Randy Brown by decision makes the most sense to me, plus 120. Then I would go Brown just like inside the distance, plus 200, because you just don't know sometimes when you're fighting, the King of Kung Fu who's turning 40. Starting to get up there with the King of Rock and Roll. And, Salikov, I think if he wins this fight, I think that too probably comes by decision. Even though a lot of Randy Brown's losses have come, by knockout, So maybe that is the safer way to go. If you're going Muslim Salikov, go by TKO knockout plus 450. I think that's his most likely outcome if he ends up the winner. But ultimately, I'm siding with Randy Brown pretty heavily in that one. Next up, we are to the co-main event of the evening. And we got a lightweight matchup between Renato Moicano and Drew Dober. Dober, the plus 154 underdog. Moicano, the minus 185 favorite. Let's start out with Renato Moicano. Winner of 3 of his last 4 fights, 4 of his last 6 against Damir Hadzovic, a first-round rear naked choke. Lost to Rafael Fiziev by first-round knockout December of 2020. Then gets 2 straight rear naked choke victories in the second round against Jai Herbert and Alexander Hernandez. Then a unanimous decision loss to RDA March of 2022 at UFC 272, getting outstruck 149-88 and taken down 5 times. Bounced back his last time out in November, all the way back in 2022 against Brad Riddell. Got the first round rear naked choke victory against Riddell at UFC 281. Drew Dober. And by the way, these guys are comparable in age. Dober will be at a 2-inch reach disadvantage, but comparable in age matters when now in the UFC when you were born in the 80s. Winner of 4 of his last 5. Dating back to March of 2022, Dober's a guy that has remained active, has been in some exciting fights. He won 3 fights in a row starting in March of 2022. 3 knockouts in the first, second, and third round at different times against Terrence T-Rex, McKinney, Rafael Alves, and Bobby Green. He got knocked out in the first round by Matt Steamroller Frivola, May of 2023, but then bounced back October of last year, the first round knockout over Ricky Glenn. He has, both these guys have had to fight a lot of tough fighters over their career. Dober, too, has a win over Alexander Hernandez by knockout. He does have a loss to Brad Riddell, who was able to take him down 5 times. But it's a different skill set that these two are, posing against their opponents. Dober, too, has a win over Alexander Hernandez. Nasrat Haqparast, that's one. But for the love of God, the guys that, who their losses are. Between Rafael Fiziev, Dober, Islam Makhachev, Beneil Dariush. These are guys that have hung around this top 15 spot in lightweight, at different times, at different places over the last few years. This is a fun one. I like the activity level for sure from Dober. Moicano maybe some more meaningful wins in the past, but those are wins that Drew Dober kind of had already had. And we kind of didn't know what was up with Bobby Green, too, at the time, because he ended up getting 2 straight impressive wins and looking better and better after that. And Ricky Glenn, had been doing a lot of losing for sure. Maybe that one was a little bit more set up to get an exciting win for Drew Dober. Frivola, that's a guy that's dangerous to a lot of people anytime out. Honestly, I think because of the difference in skills and because this fight starts on the feet, I call this, maybe a 50-50 fight. I think it's that close, especially with the guys that are on these two's resume, both as wins and losses. Give me Drew Dober plus 154. Hit it like Dober's going to hit Renato Moicano. Drew Dober.
Nick, one comment, man. One comment.
Oh, don't be scared, homie.
Especially when your opponent has involved since November of 2022 and you are frequently willing to hop in the cage and net yet another knockout. I think I could see me using either of these guys depending on their price, although maybe less likely if Moicano is going to be more expensive concerning the other pricier options that will probably be in DFS this week. But I think that if you're going, this is a little easier. How are you going to, bet Drew Dober to win this fight? By TKO knockout, plus 225. How are you going to bet Moicano to win this? By submission, plus 120. I think both of those are valuable props. And I think there's strong value to both of them. And now, folks, we are to the main event of UFC Vegas 85.
Break out the red panties.
We got a middleweight matchup between Nasruddin Imavov and Roman Dolidze. Imavov, the minus 170 favorite. Dolidze, the plus 142 underdog. Let's start off with let's start off with Roman Dolidze. Wait, Dolidze is the plus 142 underdog. Very interesting. Let's see what I think about that. Imavov. Coming off a loss and a no contest. Got pieced up by Sean Strickland January last year in a unanimous decision loss and was well on his way to a victory against Chris Curtis at UFC 289 before the headbutt turned that into a no contest. Before then, he was on a 3-fight winning streak against Ian Heinisch, Edmund Shabazian, both second-round knockouts, and a unanimous decision win over Joaquin Buckley. Does have a loss to Phil Hawes in his career. Roman Dolidze, born in 1988, so he is 7 years older. He will have a 1-inch reach advantage. This is weird, right? Because, who has the most understandable loss? I think they both have very understandable last losses. Dolidze's being a Marvin Vettori, who outstruck him 106-71 UFC 286. Dolidze probably the best win, being Jack Hermanson by second-round knockout December of 2022. It's just been some time since that. Before the Vettori loss, he was coming off a 4-fight winning streak against Loriana Staropoli by unanimous decision, and then first-round knockouts over Kyle Dawkins and Phil Hawes before getting the second-round knockout over Jack Hermanson. Hermanson and Kyle Dawkins, those are really solid wins. And I think that Imavov doesn't have a win that's as good. Chris Curtis probably would have been close. It's not as good of a win as Jack Hermanson is, for sure. But that would have been, pretty close. So, giving Imavov the credit for that, even though, they didn't get to finish that fight, it was still the second round when they called it no contest. I see being able to use, either one of these guys in DFS. I think there's knockout possibility. I think there's triple-digit striking possibility. But I think this is about a 50-50 fight, again. And I think it's kind of crazy to me to see. I mean, this could be pick'em very easily. Any weird layoffs for Roman? At least he got back in there in 2023 once, even though it was a loss. He did land 71 strikes against Marvin Vettori, who's very good at getting those, 30. He usually does it with some takedowns, but, he's good at controlling a fight, and he's a really good middleweight. So, I don't know. This strikes me as a 50-50 fight again. I think this could be pick'em. I wouldn't bat an eye. Give me Roman Dolidze, plus 142. As far as outcome, Nasruddin's 2 losses in the UFC, even to Phil Hawes and to Sean Strickland, were both by, decisions. Roman Dolidze, his only 2 losses in the UFC are both by decision. Both of these guys, have a handful of knockout wins. I think, it's Roman that is the more likely to get the knockout. I believe they've each been in 5-round fight. No, he is not. Even though the Vettori fight, that was at UFC 286, so that was not a 5-round fight that Dolidze has ever been a part of. Imavov has, even though it was a loss to Sean Strickland. And apparently 5 rounds against Sean Strickland can really mess you up for a good amount of time. I think that is a point for Nasruddin Imavov for sure, for having, UFC main event experience. I still have to go with, whatever guy's giving you plus money in this one. And I think that Imavov is the more likely of the two to end up getting the, maybe a decision victory. I think that's maybe more like, but it's still, knockout is on the table. I have to say, Imavov by decision plus 240, Imavov by TKO knockout plus 225. I don't know. I'll go Imavov by decision plus 240, but again, those are really close in value. Roman by knockout, that's plus 350, and then Roman by decision is plus 700. That's very interesting. So I think there's really good value on those Roman numbers. I think you pick either one of those. I'd still, maybe Roman by TKO knockout makes a little more sense just because we have not seen Roman in a 5-round fight in the UFC. But that's the 13-fight card for UFC Vegas 85. And folks, that is it for episode 122 of RotoBaller's official MMA podcast. Again, be in the RotoBaller MMA Discord from 2 to 3 p.m. on Saturday to talk DFS and sports betting strategy for UFC Vegas 85. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. That is where you can find all my picks for all other MMA organizations and big boxing events. Follow the podcast at Tat That MMA Podcast on Facebook, Spotify, and the YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, comment, leave favorable reviews. Tell your friends. We'll get back to more outside the UFC MMA action next week. Check out my recent interlude episode with professional football hopeful, running back, fullback out of Elizabeth City State University, Jari Pitt. We got more interlude episodes that are in the works. Folks, thanks for listening. Have yourselves a fantastic weekend, and peace.
Break out the red panties.